Imagine for a moment that you were born 40,000 years ago. There isn't a single written word in the world. No phones, no internet, not even the complex language we use today. But observe that group of Homo sapiens gathered around a crackling fire. They are communicating, not just grunting or pointing at food. They are weaving something far more sophisticated, humanity's first social network, a network that connected entire tribes across continents, that preserved vital knowledge for generations, that created emotional bonds capable of moving ice mountains, and all of this without a single notification, like, or emoji. How on earth did they manage that, and why might this story completely change what you think about human connection? The answer is hidden in the latest discoveries of cognitive archaeology, a field that literally unearths humanity's first social algorithms. Get ready for a journey that goes from the deepest caves in France to today's most advanced neuroscience labs, revealing how our need for connection shaped not only our culture, but our very brain evolution. The original profile, when your body was your bio. We see in the face of a Homo sapiens their scars, body paint, and expressions. Before the first digital "about me" existed, our ancestors had already discovered something revolutionary. Their own bodies were living profiles. Every scar told a story of a successful hunt. Every facial painting communicated status, lineage, spiritual experiences. Archaeologist Rebecca Ragg Sykes, studying Neanderthal fossils in Europe, discovered fascinating evidence. As early as 250,000 years ago, our evolutionary cousins decorated marine shells with ochre pigments. It wasn't just vanity, it was strategic communication, an identification system that worked better than any modern QR code. But the complexity of this system was far greater than we imagined. Recent studies conducted by Dr. Marie Soresi from Leiden University revealed that different Neanderthal groups developed specific visual signatures, unique combinations of colors, patterns, and materials that functioned as true tribal logos. It was Paleolithic branding in its purest form. Imagine the sophistication. A stranger approaches your group. In seconds, just by observing their body decorations, you can identify where they come from, their social standing, if they are married, how many children they have, what kind of hunter they are, and even if they have undergone specific initiation rituals. It was a complete resume painted on the skin. In South Africa, in Blombos Cave, we find the Paleolithic equivalents of the first posts, symbolic engravings in red ochre, dated 73,000 years ago. Geometric patterns that served no purpose for hunting or shelter. They served something even more powerful, connecting minds across time and space. Dr. Christopher Henshelwood, who discovered these marks, realized something profound. Those simple drawings represented the birth of complex symbolic thought, the exact moment we stopped being merely intelligent animals and became humans, capable of creating shared meanings. Microscopic analyses of these engravings revealed something even more impressive. They were made in specific sequences, following precise geometric rules. They weren't random scribbles. They were communication protocols, humanity's first visual memes, carrying encoded information that could be read by any group member who knew the system. And here's the most striking detail. Researchers from the University of Bergen discovered that these marks functioned as access passwords. Different groups developed exclusive visual codes. Knowing the correct pattern meant belonging to the group. Not knowing meant being an outsider, potentially dangerous. Paleolithic YouTube, performance as viral content. Forget YouTube algorithms for a moment. 35,000 years ago, our ancestors had already created the most efficient information-sharing system in history, storytelling through bodily performance. A hunter returns from a dangerous expedition. He doesn't just say, "I saw a mammoth." He embodies the mammoth. His arms become the gigantic tusks. His heavy steps mimic the creature's deafening sound. His wide eyes convey the terror and adrenaline of that encounter. Modern neurological studies prove that our brain responds 6 times more intensely to bodily narratives than to simple verbal information. Our ancestors discovered this instinctively. They knew that a story felt in the body was a story remembered by the entire tribe. But the neuroscience behind it is even more fascinating. Dr. Michael Tomasello from the Max Planck Institute demonstrated that when we observe narrative performance, our brain activates the same neural circuits that would be active if we were living the real experience. It was direct experience transmission, downloading memories from one mind to another. Imagine the evolutionary efficiency. A single experienced hunter could program the entire tribe with his survival discoveries. Prey locations, predator behaviors, seasonal changes, migration routes, all transmitted through performances that lasted hours and were repeated for generations. Archaeologists studying Paleolithic sites in Siberia have found physical evidence of this system. Flattened circular areas, surrounded by stones arranged in specific patterns, humanity's first stages, a place where knowledge was shared, preserved, and transmitted through ritual performance. And there were hierarchies of content creators, master storytellers who developed specific reputations, some specialized in hunting stories, others in knowledge about medicinal plants, still others in celestial navigation. It was specialization of Paleolithic influences. Most impressively, these performances evolved to include elements we've only discovered with modern psychology: suspense, conflict, resolution, emotional catharsis. Our ancestors intuitively created the narrative structures that Hollywood still uses today. In the caves of Lascaux, 17,000 years ago, we find humanity's first news feed. They weren't just drawings of animals, they were shared mental maps, seasonal calendars, survival manuals. Each painting was a viral post that could save lives decades later. And here's the most fascinating detail. Archaeologists discovered that these paintings were made in communal sessions. Hands of adults and children, men and women, superimposed on the same walls. It was real-time creative collaboration. The first collaborative feed in history. Spectrographic analyses of the pigments revealed something even more surprising. The paintings were updated regularly. New layers added seasonally, corrections made as new knowledge was acquired. It was Paleolithic content management, collective curation of vital information. The first hierarchical social network, the tribal operating system. You think we invented closed and open groups? The circles of intimate friends versus casual acquaintances? Get ready for a revelation. 50,000 years ago, our ancestors already operated social networks with hierarchies more sophisticated than LinkedIn. Robin Dunbar, an anthropologist at Oxford University, discovered something that changed our understanding of social cognition. The famous Dunbar's number, approximately 150 people, represents the maximum limit of stable social relationships our brain can maintain, and that number hasn't changed since the Paleolithic. Imagine the dynamic. You have your inner circle of 5 people, your nuclear family, then a group of 15, your closest hunting partners, next, 50 people, your extended tribe, and finally, 150, your complete network of safety and social exchange. But here's what will truly surprise you. Archaeologists studying patterns of Paleolithic settlements discovered that this structure was geographically visible. Campfires arranged in concentric circles, shared tools following precisely these social hierarchies. Recent research by Dr. Sarah Lacey from the University of Delaware mapped hundreds of Paleolithic sites and confirmed something impressive. Social architecture was universal. Regardless of geographical region or temporal period, human groups organized their physical spaces following the exact same neurological hierarchies that Dunbar identified. It was as if our brain came with a pre-installed social operating system, dictating not only how we relate, but how we organize the space around us. Each ring of proximity corresponded to different levels of trust, resource sharing, and mutual obligations. And there was something even more sophisticated, a reputation system based on reciprocity. If you shared meat today, you created social credits for times of scarcity. If you failed to reciprocate favors, your popularity in the tribe quickly plummeted. It was brutal but efficient social gamification. Ethnographic studies of modern hunter-gatherer societies reveal the complexity of this reputational system. Every social action was scored: generosity in food sharing, courage during hunts, skill in resolving conflicts, competence in specific knowledge. It was an organic social algorithm constantly calculating your tribal ranking. And the content moderation mechanisms were equally sophisticated. Antisocial behaviors were punished through gradual exclusion, first from the inner circle, then from communal rituals, finally from the entire group. It was the first ban system in history, and far more definitive than any modern digital suspension. Most fascinating is that this system included social rehabilitation mechanisms. Banished individuals could regain status through heroic actions, demonstrations of behavioral change, or exceptional contributions to the group. It was Paleolithic second chances, but you really had to earn them. The first spiritual hashtags. Connecting invisible worlds around 30,000 years ago, something happened that would forever change how humans connected. The explosion of ritualized spiritual practices. And they worked exactly like modern hashtags, classification systems that connected distant groups through shared symbols. David Lewis Williams, an archaeologist specializing in rock art, made a striking discovery studying the deepest caves of France and Spain. The paintings weren't just in habitable areas, they were in the most dangerous, inaccessible places, where only people in altered states of consciousness would venture. Chemical analysis of pigments revealed traces of natural psychoactive substances. Our ancestors weren't just painting, they were posting their mystical experiences to be discovered by future initiates. Each symbol was a spiritual hashtag. Bison, vision; full moon, ritual, was journey to the spiritual world. Imagine the intensity of that moment. You descend meters below the surface into claustrophobic tunnels, lit only by flickering torches, your pupils dilated by the transcendental experience. And then, you see, symbols left by someone who went through the exact same spiritual journey decades before. It was human connection crossing time and space. It was humanity's first spiritual social network, but the sophistication of these spiritual networks was far greater than we imagined. Dr. Jean Klotz, studying the Chauvet Cave, discovered that different chambers were dedicated to different types of mystical experiences. There were specialized rooms, one for hunting visions, another for fertility rituals, still another for communication with dead ancestors. It was sacred architecture, functioning as different groups or communities within the same spiritual social network. Each space had its own symbols, its own rules, its own initiates. And most impressively, archaeological evidence shows that these systems remained active for thousands of years. Successive generations returned to the same sacred sites, adding their own experiences to those of their ancestors. It was spiritual continuity that makes any Twitter thread seem ephemeral. Mystical conversations that lasted millennia, with participants separated by hundreds of generations, but united by shared transcendental experiences. DNA analysis found in crystallized saliva in some caves reveals something even more surprising. People traveled hundreds of miles specifically to participate in these underground rituals. It was Paleolithic pilgrimage, spiritual networking on a continental scale, and there were spiritual influencers, shaman specialists whose artistic signatures appear in multiple caves separated by vast distances. They were itinerant mystical content creators, carrying symbols and practices between different communities, keeping the spiritual network connected and synchronized. Paleolithic dating app, love and genes across continents. Now let's talk about something that will make you completely rethink dating apps. How our ancestors solved the problem of long-distance relationships and genetic diversity 40,000 years ago. Chris Stringer, a paleoanthropologist at the Natural History Museum in London, analyzed DNA from European fossils and made a surprising discovery. Paleolithic populations maintained constant gene flow across distances of hundreds of miles. This means they had organized systems for meetups between tribes. Picture this. Once a year, at the peak of summer, tribes scattered across vast regions would gather at specific sacred sites. It wasn't just trade. It was Paleolithic speed dating. Young people aged 16-17 were introduced to potential partners from other lineages. Gifts were exchanged, skills demonstrated, bonds formed. Archaeologists have found evidence of these mating festivals at sites like Dolní Věstonice in the Czech Republic. Massive concentrations of tools, ornaments, and food remains dated to the same annual time for consecutive decades. It was social networking on a continental scale. And most incredibly, isotopic analyses of bones show that many people lived hundreds of miles away from where they were born. The system worked. People fell in love, moved tribes, created new connections. It was migration driven by relationships, exactly like international marriages today. But the complexity of these Paleolithic marital systems was far greater than we imagined. Dr. Katarina Harvati from the University of Tübingen studied patterns of cranial variation in European fossils and discovered evidence of biological compatibility algorithms. Different groups developed specific preferences for certain physical characteristics that indicated optimal genetic diversity. It was sophisticated sexual selection. Our ancestors intuitively avoided inbreeding and maximized hybrid vigor, all without understanding a single word about genetics. And there were elaborate courtship protocols, dance rituals that lasted days, skill competitions, artistic demonstrations, symbolic offerings. It was Paleolithic romantic gamification. Young people competed not only for physical attractiveness, but for social competence, creativity, and spiritual status. Ethnographic studies of modern hunter-gatherer societies reveal how these systems worked in practice. There were marital ambassadors, specialized intermediaries, who knew lineages from multiple tribes and organized strategic introductions. It was professional matchmaking, ensuring not only individual compatibility, but intertribal stability. And the relationship profiles were elaborate. Each young person had specific reputations that preceded their arrival at the festivals. Hunting skills, artistic talents, family lineage, spiritual experiences. Everything was known and discussed even before the first in-person meeting. The first social media crisis, when the ice broke the internet. But every social network has its moments of crisis. And 20,000 years ago, humanity's first social network faced its biggest test, the last glacial maximum. Imagine, temperatures plummeted dramatically. Glaciers advanced over vast, habitable regions. Groups that had been connected for thousands of years were forced to separate by impassable ice barriers. What happens when your survival network collapses? When groups that shared knowledge, genes, and resources become isolated for hundreds of generations? Modern genetic analyses reveal a shocking answer. Some European populations became so isolated that they developed distinct physical characteristics in just 5,000 years. The flow of information stopped. Survival techniques were lost. Some tribes simply disappeared. But here's the deepest lesson. The groups that survived were precisely those that managed to maintain minimal connections, that preserved systems of symbolic communication, that did not give up seeking out other humans, even when it seemed impossible. It was social resilience in its purest form. Dr. Johannes Krause, an ancient DNA expert from the Max Planck Institute, mapped this social crisis through genomic analyses. What he discovered is profound. During the glacial peak, the genetic diversity of some European populations plummeted to dangerously low levels. It was a severe genetic bottleneck, a direct result of social isolation. But some groups developed extraordinary strategies for social survival. Archaeological evidence from glacial refugia in the Iberian Peninsula and the Balkans shows something fascinating. Long-distance communication systems using smoke signals, rock cairns, and strategically placed supply caches. It was Paleolithic communication infrastructure, physical networks maintaining contact between isolated groups. Encoded messages left in specific locations, visited seasonally by different tribes. It was humanity's first postal system, functioning across frozen and hostile landscapes, and there were social emergency protocols, specific rituals for situations of extreme isolation, methods of cultural preservation when groups became too small to maintain complex traditions, backup systems for vital knowledge. Groups that survived the glacial maximum developed what we can call distributed social resilience, the ability to maintain cultural identity and essential knowledge even when reduced to tiny family units. The reboot. When networks reconnected. 12,000 years ago, when the ice finally retreated, something extraordinary happened. The Paleolithic social networks reconnected. Isolated groups met again. And in a matter of a few thousand years, a blink of an eye in evolutionary terms, agriculture, cities, writing, civilization were born. It was no coincidence. It was a direct consequence of social reconnection. Dr. Mark Thomas from University College London studied this post-glacial reconnection through genetic and archaeological analyses. What he discovered is extraordinary. As soon as the geographical barriers dissolved, there was a literal explosion of technological and social innovation. It was as if the forced isolation had created independent laboratories of cultural experimentation. Each group developed unique solutions to survival problems. When they reconnected, there was a massive transfer of technology and knowledge between populations. Imagine the moment. Groups that had been separated for 5,000 years reunite. Languages diverged, technologies evolved independently, spiritual practices took different paths. It was cultural synchronization on a continental scale, a fusion of innovations accumulated over millennia of parallel development. And the archaeological evidence is striking. A sudden explosion of new types of tools, hybrid artistic techniques combining different traditions, agricultural systems integrating knowledge from multiple regions. It was Paleolithic crowdsourcing, collective intelligence reintegrated after forced fragmentation. Even more fascinating, linguistic analyses suggest that complex language itself may have emerged from this reconnection. Groups with simplified communication systems, due to isolation, needed to rapidly develop more sophisticated vocabularies and grammars to facilitate exchange between divergent cultures. It was the birth of language as social technology, a specific tool for connecting complex human networks. The final lesson: humanity's social DNA. So the next time you endlessly scroll through your feed, remember, you're not doing anything new. You're following an impulse that has existed for 50,000 years. The fundamental need to connect, share experiences, and be part of something bigger than yourself. The difference is that our ancestors had to create connection systems that ensured real physical and emotional survival. They didn't have like buttons, but they had something more powerful: physical presence, eye contact, shared human warmth around fires that protected against the infinite darkness. Maybe the question isn't how they created social networks without technology. Maybe it's, what did we lose when we replaced campfires with screens? And can we still feel that ancestral warmth that kept our species together through the Ice Age? Modern neuroscience discoveries suggest something profound. Our brain still operates with the same social circuits developed during the Paleolithic. When we see someone we like online, we activate the same neural areas that our ancestors activated when recognizing tribe members around the campfire. When we share a story on social media, we are executing the same impulse that led Paleolithic hunters to perform their adventures for the entire tribe. When we feel FOMO, fear of missing out, we are experiencing the same alert system that kept our ancestors connected to vital survival information. The irony is that the more advanced our social technology becomes, the more evident it is that it's trying to replicate something that already worked perfectly 50,000 years ago: authentic human connection, meaningful sharing of experiences, and a sense of belonging to something bigger than ourselves. But there's something technology hasn't yet managed to replicate: the real cost of Paleolithic connection. Our ancestors risked their lives to maintain contact with other groups. They traveled for weeks through dangerous territories to participate in communal rituals. They invested massive physical and emotional energy in every relationship. It was connection earned with effort, valued because it was scarce, preserved because it was vital. Perhaps this is the most important lesson we can learn from humanity's first social network. Real connection demands real investment. If this 50,000-year journey has made you rethink what it means to be truly connected, leave a like and subscribe for more discoveries about what makes us profoundly human. Because our story is far more fascinating than any algorithm will ever be able to capture. And who knows, the next time you feel disconnected despite being online 24/7, you might remember those humans around the campfire 40,000 years ago. They had something we are constantly trying to recreate: total presence, complete attention, and connection that truly mattered for survival. Maybe it's time to turn off notifications for a few hours and look for a campfire, or at least some real people to look in the eyes.